How are y'all? Wyrm here. So the debate of the new melee DPS is still going on. As you've seen, my last few videos have actually gone into the subject. I've still been thinking about what it could be. Like, new theories keep popping in and out of my head in terms of what would work, what wouldn't work. And the player base, I'm not alone on this, the player base is doing it all as well. Now, as I was going to bed last night, I was thinking about what this melee DPS could be. Absolutely the wrong time to be thinking about stuff because it would keep me up all night, which it almost did. Now, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about, suddenly in my mind, stuff about the work I've been doing this morning in my professional career actually jumped into my head. And then it just hit me like that. One of the main methodologies or things I use in my professional career to get stuff done is, if somebody comes to me with an issue or a request, I put myself into their shoes. They're asking me for this. What's the best way to get this thing done from my perspective, and looking in their shoes, that would work best for them, work best for me, and work best for the company in general. So I thought about it like that, and then I realized, what if I put myself into the shoes of an FF14 developer and look at it from their perspective, instead of looking at it from a player perspective? Like, from a player perspective, it's like, this is what we want. From a dev's perspective, you look at it as, right, this is a job we need to put in, but it needs to work, it needs to be unique, it needs to have a role in the actual world, and it needs to be something that we can implement with the current technology. So I thought about it like that for a while. I was tossing and turning in bed for a while, and I finally got some sleep. I woke up early today. I've had multiple cups of tea, and I've been doing a lot of theory crafting and writing about this actual subject before I actually started recording. So I came up with a couple of theories regarding this, so I just wanted to go through those with you real quick. This is not going to be a long video. I'm just going to quickly go through it, just as a way of thinking about what this actual melee DPS could be. So first off, the theory is, I put myself into the shoes of an FF14 developer, the person behind thinking about what this new job could be, how it would work, what weapon they would use. But there's two main categories that it need to fit in. So the first thing is, the job would need to be unique, and it would need to be different from the others in game. Now, all the jobs that we have, they have some similarities, but they all stand on their own 2 feet and they stand apart. So this new job would actually need to do the same thing. In terms of looking at that, I had to look at all the melee DPS that we have in the game in general. So we have the monk, which uses their fists, which is a blunt type weapon. Then you have the dragoon with their lance, which is a piercing weapon. Then you have the ninja with their knives, which are slashing weapons. Then you have the samurai with the katana, which is also a slashing weapon. Now, if I was a developer and I was looking at that, I'd just go, alright, the last two jobs that we added to the game have been bladed wielding slashing type weapons with the knives and the katana. So would I want to add another one? Probably not. If I was looking at it from just that perspective, I'd just go, we're kind of just following a formula here at this stage, where we're just adding this new melee DPS in that has some sort of bladed slashing sword or something like that. The last two melee DPS we got had slashing swords. It's not unique, it's not something that would just pop out. Now, my second criteria was that it has to fit into the lore of the FF14 world. If you look at all the jobs that we have at the moment, they all have a lore established in the game, or something that can just be newly written up. So it would need to fit into the general premise of the game, particularly with the expansion coming up. It would need to fit into the expansion. That's what I think anyway. Now, as I was thinking about this, I started thinking about the general theme of the expansion. Now, this is an important part. One of the primary themes of the expansion is we're going to Thavnair. Now, Thavnair is a very big island. Most likely it's going to encompass most of the zones that we're going to be going through. So I thought about it like that. So in the announcement showcase, we got some information about Thavnair. More information that we've actually had about Thavnair in general in all these years. Now, we know from the screenshots that we've seen, so similar to what I'll show here, Thavnair and Razathan, for example, have a kind of Indian or Arabian theme to them. It's mostly on the Indian side, as you can see from the architecture, but some of the actual the themes that we've seen in the actual showcase in general. Show it to have a more of an Indian theme than anything else. So I think that was a direct inspiration for Razat-Han, if not for most of Thavnair. Now, Wyrm, you may be thinking, where the hell are you going with this? Get to the point. Alright, I'll get to the point. So, I thought about it like this. So, if Razat-Han and Thavnair have this sort of Indian theme or inspiration, what if I look at the new melee DPS from the same lens? Look at it through that lens and just see it as some melee DPS that would fit into that sort of culture, or something that you could see being in Thavnair. So I thought about it like that, and I came up with a couple of theories regarding that. So I started doing research into ancient Indian and ancient Arabian weapons, particularly on the Indian side, and looked at some of the traditional weapons that they've used in the past. And I came up with a few theories about what possible weapon we could actually see from that perspective. If I was a developer and I have this Indian theme around the actual expansion, what sort of melee DPS would I add in that has that sort of theme? Now, the first weapon I thought of was a weapon called the Gada. Now, the Gada is essentially a mace. So, for example, you see here, this is more ornamental than anything else. It's on eBay. Or let me get a better example, actually. Here's one. So, it's essentially just a pole with a large weight at the end, used as a blunt type weapon for doing massive smashing damage against your opponent. Now, as you can see from this guy using this one, what is that face anyway? Just using it like that, you'd use it as a smashing weapon. Now, this could actually be a one-handed variant similar to what this is. Now, that's more ornamental than anything else, but you could see them just using this as a smashing weapon, or using the pole similar to a warhammer, but more as a mace than anything else than a warhammer. But it's a type of weapon that could actually fit into the theme of the Indian culture and the Indian inspired theme of Thavnair, but could also be a unique melee DPS in terms of having this big weighted mace. And I've gone into maces in my last video. It's definitely a viable option, and we don't have anything like this. So this is definitely a category and an idea in my mind of something that could actually be added. Now, while we're on the subject of that, I'm going into another traditional ancient Indian weapon. It's called a gurs. I think that's how you pronounce it. Now, if you look at this, it actually looks very similar to a morning star, if you've ever seen one of those before. But this is actually a traditional ancient Indian weapon that is similar to the Gada that I mentioned before, except it has spikes at the big rounded weight at the other end of it, so as you can see here. So this would do a lot more damage than the Gada itself, and it would be just as easily to wield, to be honest. Now, looking at it, is it something that could definitely be added? Absolutely. It looks absolutely amazing, and it would something that would be very unique. But I'd put it in the same category as the Gada, to be honest, as something that could be added, because I think the Gada and the Gurs could actually just share the same kind of archetype in terms of the weapon style. So I think it's the same weapon, but it's an example of what it could be. So it's just another example of how we could get some mace wielder, both dual-handed or single-handed. Now, my third theory, and as soon as I saw it, I was just going, why didn't I think of this sooner? It's called the Zaghal or the Zagnal. I'm not very sure. I'm really sorry about butchering these names. But the point of it is, it's a ancient Indian warhammer. So as you can see here from this example here, it looks like an axe or a pole or a hammer, except for a big weighted hammer at the end. You have this big weighted blade at the end. So it's still classified as a hammer or even a battle axe, for lack of a better word, but it just looks so cool and so unique. I mean, look at this thing. Imagine a melee DPS wielding something like this. It would fit the hammer or blunt category, except you had this bladed weapon at the end, and it would be very similar to the side, which I've also gone into in my previous video as well. So when I was looking at this, I was like, this could work. This could definitely work. It could even be a two-handed variant. Like, you could have a two-handed one, or you could have dual wielding of these weapons of a smaller type. So this is definitely something that could actually fit into the game, and there's definitely a place for it. Now, one of the last weapons I was thinking about was a weapon called a parachute. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Now, essentially, this is a battle axe of ancient Indian design. So they can be one-handed or two-handed weapons. Now, they look just like normal battle axes, and you're probably thinking warriors already in the game. That's true, but I'm thinking about this mainly from this sort of perspective. So you have two smaller one-handed axes that you use for slashing, bashing, blunt weapon. Something that could definitely be an option in terms of it has that ancient Indian reference, and it could be added into the game. Now, I wouldn't be doing this ancient Indian culture justice if I didn't mention a weapon that they're most famous for. And the weapon itself is the Talwar. Now, the Talwar is probably a weapon you've already heard of. Now, it's a pretty famous weapon that can trace its roots back to India. The Talwar was a very popular sword. It was used primarily one-handed, mainly because of its grip here. The grip usually had this ball at the end that made it that it was difficult to actually wield it in any other way than a one-handed, similar to... It was wielded by cavalry a lot. But a two-handed one would definitely be possible, but I don't think the handle would allow for much range like that. It was primarily meant to be drawn from the hilt, for example, and used as a one-handed slashing weapon. Now, it's definitely possible we could get something like this, but I think we've already got enough slashing weapons in the game that if I was a developer looking at this, I'd just go, it's too similar to Samurai. Even though it's a beautiful weapon, it's too similar to the Samurai, which was the last melee DPS we added. Now, the last thing I was thinking of that's not even Indian reference or any other reference for that matter was them creating a new type of melee weapon specifically for Final Fantasy XIV. Similar to what they did with the Sage when creating those blaster things. I can't remember their name, sorry. They're just gone out of my mind already. But my point is this. As I was thinking about that, like, alright, you could create a brand new melee weapon. That would be a very difficult task from a developer standpoint. Because you think about it like this. Adding these 4 laser weapons for the Sage that just zoom around like drones, just blasting the enemy out of it. That's an easier thing to do than adding a melee weapon. A melee weapon, you're pretty limited in terms of where you can go, because it needs to look like it functions properly. Now, I know you're probably thinking about this. We have weapons that don't look like they function properly. However, they do actually function properly. A prime example of this is the Dark Knight. Now, the Dark Knight has this very big two-handed sword that you'd look at it in real life and you just go, that would never work in real life. However, they've made it look like it works. Now, my prime example is the way they hold it. So they hold it like this, with it draping down like this to just kind of ensure that the weight of it is actually being able to swing like this. Now, you've seen the Dark Knights swinging their sword around. They don't hold it up in one hand just going, I'm invincible, bash, bash, bash. They swing it like this using the weight of the blade in order to swing it. But then they also use the weight of their own body. So as they're swinging it, their body is swinging as well, which also swings the blade. So it's a weight and counterweight, just that sort of motion going around, swinging the blade. So they have it like this, they swing it, and their body swings as well. That's how the Dark Knight works. So that's how a new weapon specifically tailored for Final Fantasy XIV would have to work. It would need to look semi-functional. Now, as I've already stated, they'd be pretty limited in terms of what they could add. I mean, it's not that they're going to add like floating axes flying around a melee user just slashing at somebody, but we've seen more ridiculous weapons, to be honest, and pretty much the ceiling is pretty high in terms of what they could do. But from my personal opinion, from looking at it from a developer perspective, they'd want to go somewhere traditional when it comes to a melee weapon. Something easy to implement, but also easy to develop new weapons for. If you're doing all these spinny weapons and all, or that weird looking thing, yeah, it would just be more difficult, in my opinion. But anyway, guys, what do you think about this? This was just my rambling. I think it's more of a rambling video than anything else, so I apologize if I just went off in a tirade. But what do you think about this subject itself? What do you think an actual melee could be? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to like and subscribe to my videos and keep an eye out for my next ones. I was supposed to do a lore video for Endwalker, which I'm actually still doing at the moment. I'm just kind of fleshing it out at the moment, and it should be up soon. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.